Okay, welcome to the Institute of Jewish Chaplaincy, and we are continuing our discussion on the book called Positivity Bias by Rabbi Mendel Kalmenson, where we talk about how to establish for yourself a positive bias towards life. We're focusing on also on resiliency. We're up to chapter 2, and we're talking about dwelling on the positive. And the idea that we're talking about is that scientists have coined the term negativity bias to describe the phenomenon of how human consciousness relates to the world. Essentially, our negativity bias ensures that experiences of a more negative nature have a greater effect on the psychological state and consequential behavior. And so we're talking before the recording last time about, as a neurologist, can you tell us a little bit about this concept of how the brain seems to focus on the negative and preserve that?
It's an ingrained survival mechanism. Basically, it's a fight or flight that you have to confront. So kind of those negative encounters kind of reinforce those circuits. The positive circuits tend to be kind of short-lived and don't necessarily make the survival mechanism or circuits work that way. They tend to be short-term. They're not ingrained to the same way.
So the positive outlook of this is the fact that through having that our brain tends to focus on some of the negative things to help us.
Yes, you have to actively retrieve through effort positive experience. The negative ones are almost they're circuits. You don't even have to think about them. If you see something chasing you, and my wife was out with our dog today and saw an alligator. It's our first alligator encounter here in Florida.
Welcome to Florida.
Fortunately, it was just sunning itself, but I'll tell you, if that thing moved, those circuits kick in and off you go. So.
Yeah, it's our survival mechanism.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a good thing.
Yes.
But chapter 2 is definitely true, because when I remember my war experiences or some of my things that happened to me on the police department, what I remember are those really strenuous moments when my life was at risk. And I don't remember a lot of the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So it helps us to survive. It helps us to stay focused.
Right. And the next time, Jeff, that you encountered something like that, that circuit already kicked in much quicker. That survival mechanism kicked in much quicker.
Yeah, those files are definitely at the front of the cabinet.
And I think this also slides into the whole thing about PTSD as well, right?
To some degree, yeah.
I mean, there's obviously much more to it.
Right.
But that these stress-inducing ones warn us about potential problems, but they can also go into overload and get stuck on that.
Yeah, it's like a reverberating circuit, if you will. You can look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say I remember the Scud missile attacks, but I don't remember too many of the Passover Seders. What can I mean, these, the yin and the yang, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wish I could remember some of these big family gatherings we used to have. They were a lot of fun.
Well, and I think as Zev was mentioning before, the negative ones are automatically there and the positive ones we have to work on. And this is something that in chapter 2, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was sharing with an old friend of his many, many years ago, but one of the things he talked about was that I worked on myself to look at things in a positive light. Otherwise, I could not have survived. And if you look back on where the Rebbe is coming from, the fact that that his father was imprisoned and went through all kinds of challenges through the Russian government because of being Orthodox Jewish and insisting on the Jewish rights and things. And he was sent off to Siberia. So, he didn't even make it to his son's wedding. So there's a lot of challenges in all of those pieces, but the Rebbe said that, he made a conscientious decision to focus on positive things.
And that's the chapter makes a very good point in not dwelling on the negative. The positive is so much better for your day-to-day psyche and just your interactions with other people.
Yeah. And certainly, the good times can be had. The negatives we don't have to think about too much because they're gonna be there anyway. The Rebbe wrote to someone, it's brought up in this chapter also, that to go through life in complete happiness is not designed for man, is not destined for man. One of the basic things, however, is to have a clear vision of the fundamental issues and to cultivate appropriate expectations and attitudes. So we can, this neurological thing to help us survive those negative things, they're going to be there and they're going to remind us of those things, but we don't have to, focus on those. We can make a conscientious decision to choose what we want to be thinking about and focusing on. And here that I was talking about, sometimes it's just a matter of getting the bigger picture.
Yes, absolutely right. My
So
wife today is looking at $48 million mansions, and we don't have it bad. I mean, we're working class people, but I haven't starved.
Right.
I get to enjoy myself. I have a lot of electronic little toys, and like I said, I'm probably about 25 pounds over starvation. Maybe more.
Isaiah was here, Sameth Bechalko. Who is rich when who is happy with what he has, and that's the way I was brought up.
Right.
Yeah, you could always covet other things, that you'll never have, and it's not bad. She entertains herself with the $48 million mansions, looking at those.
Well, it's interesting because I learned from a friend years ago that to buy lottery tickets. So in one sense, don't waste your money, right? But on the other sense, he said, where can you get that level of entertainment for a buck or two, right? Because you buy a ticket and then the fantasies you can have until you check who won.
That's exactly it. It's a $2 million dream that I do treat myself to. $2 dream that I could be a millionaire.
Right. So it's great fantasies.
Yeah.
It's good entertainment.
That's what I would do if I won.
Right. But we could play that, right? But setting realistic expectations. So in the realm of setting realistic expectations, again, Zev, if you would talk about, as a physician, how do you set that up so that you can help people focus on the positive while at the same time being realistic?
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that one. First of all, you have to dream. You really have to dream in order to think about a future for yourself in terms of where you're going to go with your life. You have to have those kind of thoughts at some point. And I read an interesting midrash that if you look at the dreams that Joseph not only had for himself, but he interpreted for other people. So there were three sets. There were three pairs of dreams. So the first set was his own dreams, the pair that he had about the stars and the sheaves bowing down to him. So those were dreams, but he had no thoughts about how to either interpret those dreams or to implement the dreams. The second set of dreams was with the butler and the baker when he was in prison. And the other people had the dreams, but he was able to interpret the dream. So the second stage of that is being able, you have to dream, but then you have to be able to interpret. And then the third stage is what he did for Pharaoh in interpreting his pair of dreams. And not only was he able to interpret those dreams, that he was able to implement a course of action for Pharaoh to pursue in order to to rectify what he was experiencing in those dreams. So there's a good parallel there in life. You have to have a dream. You have to be passionate about your dream. You have to be able to interpret what all that means in terms of your life and where you're going to go. And then the last thing, you have to implement a plan to make those dreams come true for yourself.
Beautiful.
How the Parsha can play into what our chapter we've read. I can see parallels to the Parsha for this week too.
Absolutely.
You look at the dream aspect, and I see how Joseph was not angry at his brothers, and he forgives them and actually embraces them after tricking Benjamin. But he knows that all this whole suffering that he had to go through, that put him as the vizier of Egypt, was to save his family. I mean, there was a purpose behind it. So he is grateful, and we talk about gratitude in this chapter. It's just interesting. It sometimes you can see the parallels between 5,000 years ago and now. It's odd.
Yeah. And to be able to create that bigger picture, I think that's what oftentimes. I remember a poster when I was in high school that said, "It's hard to remember that you came to drain the swamp when you're up to your armpits in alligators."
Yes.
So in our challenging times, we oftentimes forget the big picture. But if we step back and get a much bigger picture of all the different pieces there, then in context, I think that's one of the challenges that young folks oftentimes have, is that they don't have the half a century or more that we have looking back at ups and downs. So for them, what's facing them can be really a big deal. But in the course of half a century, we can look back and say, yeah, that wasn't that a big deal. The Alter Rebbe talks about in Tanya, your brain capacity. Little children get upset about little things, and the wiser you become, the less you're experienced. You're worried about it. And in Pirkei Avos, it talks about when you hit 100, you're dead from the world, because what's going to phase you? At 100, you've lived through so much already. What's going to phase you, right? So it's getting that big picture that says, okay, in the big picture, and we've talked about that in the context of suicide as being a permanent solution to a temporary problem. But in the moment, they're not seeing this as a temporary problem. This is overwhelming and so consuming at the time. And so, how do we bring that bigger picture to help them see the bigger piece of it?
Well, it's as cruel as this may sound, the suicide is the easy way. It's kind of the easy way out, because it's much more difficult to confront and deal with whatever the underlying issues are. And those are the kind of things that take a lot of effort and a lot of time. And you have to recognize that that's not going to be instant gratification to overcome those issues.
I'm working with someone who's going through the 12-step program for one of the anonymous programs, all founded on Alcoholics Anonymous, but there are many different versions of that now. And he's working through the 12 steps. And he was calling me, for some support on some of the pieces. And we talked about, again, the big picture. Right now, this is really hard. And, you've been successfully avoiding with your addiction. You've been successfully avoiding dealing with the real issues. The real issues are hard. They're really big stuff.
Yeah, but you can overcome most everything if you if
you want to put the effort into it.
Yeah, you have to get there, and we've seen a lot. So none of us are kids discussing this chapter.
Yeah.
Differently sometimes.
The Rebbe makes a point regarding the Rambam, Maimonides, where the Rebbe refers to a passage here from the Guide to the Perplexed. People often think that the evils in the world are more numerous than the good things. Many sayings and songs of the nations dwell on this idea. They say that a good thing is found only exceptionally, while evil things are numerous and lasting. Not only common people make this mistake, but even many who believe that they are wise. But this error results from judging the whole universe by what occurs to a single person. Only an ignorant person believes that the whole universe exists for him alone, as if nothing else required any considerations. If therefore anything happens to him contrary to his expectations, then he at once concludes that the whole universe is evil. If, however, he would take into consideration that the whole universe, form an idea of it, comprehend what a small portion he is of that, and then he could find the truth. I've heard so many people talk about all the tragedies of this pandemic, and I'm not saying they're not. There's a lot of tragedy in the pandemic. But if you choose to focus only on all the negative things, it can be truly overwhelming. If we make the choice to focus on positive things, it can switch our look around. I've been asking people past 6 months, give me 3 things that the pandemic has brought around in your life that have been phenomenally good. So let's play with that for a second.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
3 things that came about because of the pandemic that are phenomenally good. So for me, one of the quick ones is I would never have left my job to work on full-time chaplaincy. I had too much security, but once I was laid off because of the pandemic, then I was free to pursue what I really want to do, and that was great. So it was a step I never would have taken on my own, but now I was excited to do so, right? And the second part of that is the opportunity to have these discussions like we are now. A year ago, would we have taken time to sit down together on Zoom and have this conversation?
A year ago, I didn't know what Zoom was.
I have all these veterans.
I had WebEx one time.
I have all these veterans that I have opportunities. I've done over 60 hours of recordings already. And there are opportunities to meet with veterans all over the country, all over the world, actually, through Zoom. That would not have been possible a year ago. So thanks to the pandemic, personally, this has been a great opportunity for me. So not taking away from the negative, but what's your positive?
Which one of us are you asking?
Whoever speaks first.
I have one positive from this. I'm the national commander of the Jewish war veterans. And it's not that I wasn't planning to do that. It's just I wasn't sure how I was going to balance it with my civilian employment, which, since there's no school, I don't have to worry about this year. So I can really dedicate the time to doing this job right. So, it's worked for me. And unfortunately, in that respect, I've bonded with my grandchildren because I do virtual school with them. That's 2 things. You cope with life and you do make some lemonade out of lemons. And that's, I never thought I would be a teacher. I usually work security at a high school. I'm a security agent because I'm a retired police officer. It's not a security guard, but it's more like an extra cop on hand. And yeah, I'm just very glad I don't have to put the time into that this year.
I've had, I guess my 3 things would be the first would be my wife. I retired October 2019, and my wife and I, we got married in December 2018. So we've only been married for 2 years. And this is when we moved down here last year, at the end of last year, around a year ago now. This is the first time we were living together. And, it's a remarriage for both of us. You don't quite know how that's going to go. And we both ended up having COVID and having to help each other, get over it. So that was a test. We can survive that. We can survive that.
You're a survivor. That's definitely a big plus there. Both of you.
But also, I'm talking about surviving the marriage. Aside from surviving the COVID, because the odds are there in your favor. Let's face it, with a less than a 1% mortality.
Yes.
For roughly, whereas marriage has a 50% mortality. As I've already discovered before. So, so that's I'm more grateful for surviving, that than surviving COVID. Perhaps the next thing is my my guy over here.
Yeah.
Who we just got this year, and really I think helped us both. Regain our strength after COVID. If it wasn't for him, we would have been laying in the house all the time.
Right.
And he got us out of the house and got us, doing walking and building our stamina back up. So that's number two. And then number three, part of it has to do with retirement, but part of it has to do with because everything else was closed off. I was finally able to pursue some Jewish studying that I was never had time to do before in my life. So I was able to do Daf Yomi. I was able to study, online, Rambam, Mishnah Torah with the Rabbi. So
that's the beauty of retirement, anyway.
But I probably would have filled my time doing some other useless activity. But because nothing else was open, and I'm, kind of stuck at home, I tried to put the time to some decent use. Not all of it, because I still have boxes that are still unpacked, but. A year later, still about 10 boxes that are unpacked.
I repairing windows from the tornado, and then I had to move bookcase, so they're all in books. So boxes come and go.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is if we, the choice that we make to focus on positive things and find the silver lining in all the different challenges. One of the significant side effects of this negativity bias is we tend to fixate on the things we don't have or the things that are negative. And, we can get so caught up in that we're not focusing on positive things. There's a letter here that Rebbe wrote to someone in response to your letter in which you write about your current situation, that throughout your life, you have not experienced any good. It seems that you do not sense the contradiction in your letter. For a man whom God has blessed with a wife and children, to say that he's never seen any good is ungrateful to an alarming degree. Hundreds, even thousands of people pray every day to be blessed with children, and they'd give anything to have their own single child, but not have merited this. But you, the recipient of this blessing, which it seems came to you without having to especially pray for it, you don't recognize the wealth and the happiness and the blessings you have. You write twice in your letter that you have never experienced any good. So it's interesting that the person should write this, and the Rebbe is bringing out, count your blessings. You've got some phenomenal blessings. And here he's writing to the Rebbe who was never blessed with children. And the Rebbe is saying, are you paying attention? How can you say no good?
When we do our morning blessings for Shacharit, I always laugh at a few of those. But it's all about gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about gratitude for some of the simplest things.
I know.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. There's a book that I mentioned called The Choice, Embrace the Possible. It's by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. And she went through the Holocaust herself and all the challenges there. And in retrospect, she looks back and sees that at each step along the way, she chose to search and find something positive. And she searched a direction to go that would bring out positive results, never giving in to the negativity. It's a powerful book, highly recommended. It's a powerful book.
Every organism, no matter what what structure it is. You can give the same organism, person, animal, whatever, the same kind of stimulus, and you may get two different responses. So not everybody's going to react the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my father, may rest in peace, was also a Holocaust survivor and lost both of his parents, and between both of my parents lost 22 relatives. And, you know, he basically experienced, I think, a state of helplessness and hopelessness. And, you know, I don't know that he ever overcame that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think he had kind of given up on himself in terms of having a good life, but wanted that for his children.
Yeah, it's a hard challenge to find the positive and to focus on good things.
So different people in the same environment, you know, reacted to the same stimulus or the same set of events in different ways.
Yeah. And how much of that is training, and how much of that is education, how much of that is genetic? You know, I think these days they're saying it's 50-50, you know, 50% genetic, 50% is your environment and your training. But it certainly is, it's something we can work on. It's not upgefrekt.
But you can't work on the genetics, but you can certainly work on the environment aspect of it.
Right.
You can create your environment as you see fit to some degree. I mean, there's certainly always external forces
Right.
that you can't control, but the things that you can control are the things that you have to work on.
And that's the thing that Edith Eger talked about is the you know, you can't control what they do to you or your body, but you can control how you choose to perceive it and how you choose to react. And that you can make a conscientious choice about, but it's hard. It's a really, you know, tough challenge.
You Chicago guys will like this, because I saw a recent quote from Michael Jordan that said basically the only reason that he was successful was because he failed so many times.
And he didn't give up. He kept going.
He didn't give up, right?
Yeah.
You learn from your failures, and you learn how to do something different the next time that might have a different outcome.
There was a great story about in the book here that talks about Nachum Stillerman was a 9-year-old boy growing up in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and he used to deliver groceries to community members, and that included the Rebbe's mother, Allah Shalom, when she was living in Crown Heights.
Oh yeah, the favorite prayer. Yeah, I remember this one. This is good.
Yeah, so you know, he's a 9-year-old, he's delivering, and he had a chance to actually speak with the Rebbe's mother. And he asked this beautiful 9-year-old question of like, what's the Rebbe's favorite tefillah, prayer? And the Rebbe Tzadchana said, you know what, I don't know, but I could ask him. And then the next time he came to visit, so the Rebbetzin had an answer. She said, I asked the Rebbe your question, and his favorite prayer is Maida Ani. Maida Ani is the prayer we say in the morning before we're even getting up out of bed, before we even, you know, washing our hands for purity. It's in a state of impurity of the sleep that we're still, and we say this Maida Ani. It doesn't mention God's name. It's just a short, brief prayer. And yet that's the Rebbe's favorite prayer. And the little boy was like, Maida Ani? That's the Rebbe's favorite prayer? But if we look deeper, it's because this prayer is Maida Ani. I admit from the very get-go, as I'm just gaining consciousness for the day, all of this is a gift. And it's what I do with it. Beautiful, beautiful little story. And the next part of this chapter, and kind of we close the chapter off on this discussion about, according to Hasidus, the words and the feelings of gratitude that we express to God, like Maida Ani in the morning, etc., when we thank God for the blessings that we have already received, this becomes a keli, a vessel, a vehicle for more blessings, for new blessings to come down and to, to flow into our lives and bless us. And so, the Rebbe is not suggesting that it's not without a struggle. It certainly is a struggle. There's no question it's a struggle. But are we taking the time to consider and acknowledge and recognize and thank God for the blessings that we do have? We're obligated to thank God for the good as well as for the stuff that doesn't feel so good. So what are some examples that in your life of thanking God for the blessings?
100 a day.
Talk more about that.
Well, just in case you forget to come up with your own, there's a seder, a siddur that'll tell you what to be thankful for, and there's 100 blessings spread out through the 3 services in the day.
I met with a Navy veteran who there was a Navy pilot that was Orthodox, and he became Orthodox while he was in the Navy, but he was all into the idea of Mea Brachos, 100 blessings a day. And he shared this with Jesse, and Jesse just loved this idea. So he was excited about it. He got into it. So he was making blessings on all of his food, and he was making blessings for the things he was doing. And he remembers one particular day he was out on deck, and the aircraft carrier decks can get pretty greasy and messy. And when a plane is being moved, so you've got someone in the cockpit with a foot on the, whatever they call the brakes there. But you've also got, by the wheels, you've got guys with chalks to lock it in. And he was blessing the chalks and blessing the deck, and it was getting into it. And right about that time, the ship moved this way and the plane started sliding this way. And then they got the chocks in and stopped the plane like, 12 inches from the edge. And he said, this was a blessing. But how do we count our blessings every day? What do we, so there's blessings to say to thank God. What else are ways that we can count our blessings, to be cognizant and acknowledging the good?
I don't have to dwell on that. Sometimes I think I just go through the motions. I'm always waiting for God to talk to me. I mean, talk to me. And it doesn't happen, but I realize that I'm a piece of sand on the beach when it comes to the bigger picture. So, but my purpose, of course, is to try and make this world a little better place than while I'm here.
I was at the Air Force Academy last year for the National Symposium on Leadership and Character Development Leadership. And General Shaik, who is the current Chief of Chaplains for the Air Force, he was talking about, the warrior spirit in the context of having, a real religious spirit about one and a faith, a deep faith. At the end of the presentation, one of the Air Force Academy cadets raised his hand and said, "But sir, I'm not religious." And General Shaik smiled and he said, "You're in Colorado Springs. You get up every morning and you step outside and you see these glorious mountains and this beautiful view. You can't tell me that's not a religious experience." And the cadet laughed and he said, "No, that's right. You're right, sir."
Yeah, to kind of sticking with that theme a little bit, I had these similar discussions with my wife actually before we got married, and we argue, can you only see the blessings only in tefillah, only in prayer? And I would argue I see it every day in nature. And of course, she had a hard time coming from New Jersey seeing anything in nature, because all you see there, living near the George Washington Bridge, are a bunch of cars and smog and traffic and all the rest of it. And I was living in Virginia near the Blue Ridge Parkway. And when she come down to Virginia, we'd take a ride on my motorcycle to the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I would stop and I'd say, "Look, Ma gadlu ma'asecha, ma rabu ma'asecha. How goodly are your works. How can you not see it in nature? It's incredible. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I used to like the George Washington Bridge.
So some people look and they step outside and look at the beautiful city environment and they appreciate it. And other people look at the natural environment and appreciate that part. I mean,
I like that too.
I walk out in the morning. Sometimes I'll walk out of the house to go to shul. And as I step out and I'm facing east, so I'm stepping out and usually like the sun is right there and the skies are clear blue and it kind of takes my breath away every morning. I actually pause on the front steps and just thank God, count our blessings. So I'll end our session today with one idea, one suggestion on this is keeping a log. Taking a log and just writing in an empty log some ideas each day of the blessings that we have. One of the things my family did when the kids were growing up and we would have family dinner times together is that we asked everyone at the table to give 3 acknowledgements for the day, three gratitudes for the day, and just listing the gratitudes and sharing those with the family. And so that's one idea to count our blessings is to spend some time sharing with somebody else. My son in the Marine Corps, at the end of each day, many of the groups were gathering for a 5-minute prayer session in the barracks at the end of the day. And he and his battle buddy, they spent some time with gratitudes, just like, what were you grateful for today? What do you feel you actually accomplished today? And they would share positive things. And that meant that every night straight through Marine Corps boot camp, right? Even through the crucible, they were just, let's take 5 minutes and let's talk about the gratitudes for today.
Yeah, I should try that. That's interesting.
We could even do a gratitudes WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Well, it's time for you to join the, Civil Air Patrol.
Absolutely. So I thank you everyone who's joining us in live, as well as anyone who joined us on the recordings. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Gentlemen, God willing, I'll see you next Tuesday.